My name's Aron Ralston. My parents are down on Larry Ralston of Englewood, Colorado.
As the sun rose, the canyon was silent. There was no wind. Even the rocks seemed motionless. He was moving forward alone. He had taken this route before. It was not dangerous. At least, that was what he believed. A few steps, a small jump, and a narrow passage. Everything was going according to plan. Then the rock shifted. His foot slipped. He tried to regain his balance, but his body was thrown toward the void. In that instant, he reached out instinctively. A large boulder broke loose and fell into the narrow passage. The sound echoed through the canyon. When everything stopped moving, his body was trapped. His right arm was pinned between the rock and the canyon wall. In the first seconds, he could not fully understand what had happened. There was pain, but no panic. He immediately tried to pull his arm free. It did not work. He shifted his weight. The rock did not move. He looked around. The space was extremely tight. There was no one to call for help. His phone had no signal. His voice echoed, but only came back to him. "All right," he said to himself. "Stay calm. This had to be temporary. He would find a way out." He tried clearing smaller stones. He pushed against the boulder. Minutes passed. Then, hours. The sun was high above. He began to sweat. Thirst was not yet a problem, but time was moving on. He tried to feel his arm. Numbness had begun to set in. Waves of pain came and went. With a sudden surge of hope, he tried again. It did not work. The rock would not budge. No matter how hard he strained, the outcome did not change. He examined his surroundings more carefully. There was no exit. Climbing up was impossible. Going down was out of the question. The narrow space had locked him in place. For the first time, a real question emerged. When would help come? Did anyone even know he was there? He liked to plan, but this time, he had told no one where he was going. He had chosen to be alone. That thought settled heavily on his chest. As the chances of someone arriving before the end of the day faded, the canyon remained silent. As the sun slowly shifted across the sky, the voice inside him began to change. Thoughts that had started out calm were giving way to a harsher reality. This was not a minor setback that would pass quickly, and waiting might not be enough to get out of here. He paused. Steadying his breathing, he looked at his arm, then at his surroundings. And for the first time, a thought he never wanted to face became clear in his mind. He might have to get out of here on his own. As the sun began to set, warmth gave way to cold. The false sense of security provided by daylight was fading. As the shadows stretched longer, the space trapping him began to feel even narrower. He took out his water bottle. He took a small sip. He calculated how much remained. It was not much, but he knew he could not afford to finish it quickly. The night was silent. When the canyon grew dark, the sense of loneliness became heavier. Every sound was the echo of his own breathing. He could not sleep. The numbness in his arm was increasing. Pain came in waves, then disappeared again. It was the only reminder that his arm was still there. As time passed, his thoughts began to change. At first, he listed every possible way out. Would help come? Would someone pass by here by chance? Would everything be different when morning arrived? But each possibility grew weaker. The canyon was still silent. No one had come. On the second day, real calculations began. How much water remained, how much energy he had left, how long he could endure. These were no longer theoretical questions. Each one was directly tied to survival. He looked at his arm. The swelling had increased. It did not move. Sensation was almost completely gone. He began talking to himself. Hearing his own voice made him feel less alone. He thought of his family, his friends, plans left unfinished. These thoughts gave him strength, but also placed a heavier burden on his chest, because all of it could end here. At a certain point, the options became clear. Waiting meant slowly fading away. Taking action required something irreversible. He tried to push that thought out of his mind, again and again. But each time, it returned, because there was no other path left. As the night wore on, the decision slowly took shape. It was not a sudden choice. It was the result of hours of negotiation, a negotiation with himself, unheard by anyone else. With pain, with fear, and with the instinct to survive. When morning came, his face was pale. His eyes were exhausted but determined. He would not wait any longer. Time was no longer working in his favor. He looked at the equipment beside him. He held his breath. He knew what he had to do. Once that decision was made, there was no turning back. As the air began to cool, the decision was no longer just a thought. It had become a plan that needed to be carried out. He could not afford to lose time. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He checked his arm one last time. There was no feeling, no pain. That made it even harder. Because when the body no longer warns the mind, a person realizes their limits too late. He prepared the equipment beside him. Every movement was slow. He knew that rushing would lead to mistakes. He steadied his breathing, closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he thought about the outside. The open sky, moving freely. Simple things. Then he returned to where he was, that narrow, silent place with no escape. The first moments were not what he expected. The pain came with a delay, then it spread in waves. His mind felt as if it wanted to leave his body. He spoke to himself, counted numbers, tried to distract his thoughts. His sense of time collapsed. He could not tell whether minutes or hours had passed. The only thing he knew was that he had to continue. At some point, everything stopped. Sounds disappeared. His vision blurred. And then, the moment he had been waiting for arrived. His body was free. The sense of weight had changed. He collapsed to the ground. For a while, he could not move. But he was no longer trapped. Gathering what strength he had left, he began to move upward. Blood loss, exhaustion, and shock pushed his body to its limits. But he could move. That was the only proof that he was alive. When sunlight burned his eyes, he had to turn his head away. Light was something he had not seen for days. Help arrived quickly. Voices were heard. There were people. They could touch him. They could speak. Questions were asked, but answering was difficult. His consciousness drifted in and out. But one thing was certain. He had made it out. What came after was a blur. Hospital lights, medical procedures, quiet nights. When he looked in the mirror, what he saw reminded him of what he had endured. This story was not just about survival. It was about a price. He had survived. But the decision he made would continue to live with him. Some rescues are met with applause. Others are carried in silence. Please do not forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.